Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our GMAT Math Refresher class. Okay, I'm seeing my own echo. Please let me know in the chat box how well you can hear me. This will also tell me that the chat is working. Okay, good. Perfect. All right. Hopefully the audio is going to work. I got a new microphone, so okay, excellent. So thanks so much for sharing, ladies and gentlemen, where you are in your studies right now. First of all, welcome. We have a lot of people here, obviously from the Western Hemisphere, but also a few people from Asia. So good morning to you, and thanks so much for joining us here. Many of you mentioned that you are either just starting or have been studying for a little while. So today's class is going to be very practical. If you're just starting, you're going to be jumping into a deep end. And if you've been studying for a while, hopefully you can look at some of the things from a different perspective. So what I'd like to encourage you to do is turn off your phone, unless of course you're listening on your phone, and try to participate, because see, when we stay within our comfort zone, we usually don't learn, right? And for us to learn and grow and expand, we need to get outside of our comfort zone. So what does this mean? That means when I give you some questions to do, please try them. Do your best. There's no right and wrong answer. Well, there is, but for the purpose of today's class, it's not that important. What is important is that you try, because the more you try, the more you recognize what's working and what's not working, the easier it's going to be for you to improve. So let's get started. What we'll do today is we'll do a series of questions. I'll show you some strategies specifically related to the math questions. So any questions related to math that you will see on both quantitative reasoning as well as data insight sections. I'm also going to share with you a bit about how to study for the test. What resources do you need? And many of you mentioned you just need to get started. So I'll also share with you what would be the good next steps for you to get started. So let's actually dive right into our very first question. Please take a look at this question. Do whatever you think you need to do, except please don't use a calculator or Google or any other electronic aids. You could use your pen and paper. That's the only thing you're allowed on the test for these types of questions. And when you think you know what the answer is, please share it with me in a poll. I see a few answers coming in, but I'll give you a little bit more time. It's just been about 30 seconds, so I'll give you another 15 seconds or so to try to figure out what the answer is. Okay, so we're out of time for this question. And here's what I'm going to ask you to do. As we do the questions today, first of all, your answers to these questions are anonymous. So I don't know who answered and what did you answer. So try anyway. See, the thing is, on the day of the test, you can't really skip the questions. Sometimes you can go back to some questions, and we'll talk about it a little bit later, but you can't really skip them. So for us to move forward, we need to actually answer the questions. And that just develops some good habits that are going to be very helpful on the day of the test. So let me go ahead and finish the poll right now, and perhaps I can maybe even share the results with you. So as you could see, the majority of us voted for answer choice C. So hopefully that's the right answer. Let's find out. Yes, it is C. Wow. Okay, so the question is, how did you answer this question? Most importantly, what did we need to know in order to answer this question? Well, we needed to know some theory, right? One of the things we needed to know probably is what's an exponent? What does it mean? 3 to the power of 3. Well, that simply means 3 times 3 times 3, right? That's the concept of the exponent. I was actually teaching our algebra class recently to our course. And once you know what's an exponent, believe it or not, you could actually deal with many, many different questions if you understand conceptually. And a lot of the GMAT math is actually very conceptual, just based on your understanding of how the numbers work. So 3 to the power of 3, that's 3 times 3 times 3, that's 27. And if we add 27 to 4, which is 2 squared, and to 1, which is 1 to the power of 1, we are going to get 32. 32 was not among the answer choices, but we had powers of 2. So we just needed to figure out what power of 2 is exactly 32. And there are a couple of ways to do this. One of the ways is to just simply memorize them. There's nothing wrong with that. Certain things we do need to memorize, even though it's not really a test of memorization, as I'm sure you probably already noticed by now if you've been studying. Or we can just remember what's an exponent and just go ahead and start multiplying 2's until you get to 32, and then just count them up. You're going to get 5 of them. So the answer is C, 2 to the power of 5. Of course, we also need to know how to add and multiply. That's obviously very helpful to know. And that is it. That's actually all we need to know in order to do this question. So you might be wondering, so what makes the GMAT difficult? I mean, if this is as straightforward, are they going to give me maybe some integrals and some complex numbers and trigonometry and all kinds of things like that that are maybe learned in university? And the answer is no, they will not. The organization that makes the test is called the GMAT. And we have very good relationships with them. Obviously, they make the test, we help you beat the test, but we're still very good friends. I know CEO of the GMAT, and we get together and we meet fairly often. So according to the GMAT, people who make the test, this is the primary source. They say that for the GMAT, you need to know not more than what's generally taught in secondary school classes, which means some arithmetic, some elementary algebra, and some statistics. Most of the stuff that you need to know for the GMAT is from elementary school. In North America, that's usually up to about grade 7 or 8. Most of the stuff. A very small number of concepts are from high school. So if that's the case, what makes the GMAT questions difficult? Well, we're going to take a look at a few more challenging questions, somewhat trickier. And let me show you the first of these questions right now. This question looks exactly like the question we've already done. So perhaps I will also give you some time to work on this question. I'll give you about a minute and a half to try to figure out what should be the answer to this question. Okay, so that's been 2 minutes. Does anybody need more time? Okay, so please let me know if you've already finished this question. I'm going to stop the clock in just a few seconds. If you haven't chosen the answer yet, please do. Again, the exam's not going to move forward until we all answer the question. That's generally how things are on a real test. And please let me know, what did you use in order to answer this question? And in the meantime, what I could do from my side is I could actually show you what we all voted for. There's still quite a large number of people that haven't voted, but more than half of the people voted. So perhaps I can share with you what did we vote for. So as you could see, a tie between D and E, fewer people for B, nobody for A and C. Interesting. So a lot fewer people answered this question, and obviously we have quite a bit of a disagreement of what the correct answer should be. And I've given you about twice as much time. So what was more difficult about this question? I mean, it looks almost the same, right? In fact, we didn't have powers of something in the answer choices, we had the actual numbers. So one of the ways we can potentially approach this question is what we call the theory way, which is basically just do what we've done before. Instead of 1, we have 14, so it's going to take a little bit longer to actually calculate those numbers, 14, 15, and 16, but we could do that. I mean, it's going to take some time, but well, we could. And if we were to do this and add all of these numbers up, we are actually going to get the answer, and the answer is D. What's the problem with this strategy? Is that a good strategy? What do you think? Not a good strategy, right? Yes, absolutely. By the way, I do see everybody's chat. So in case you don't see other people putting anything in the chat box, that's more just so you can feel safe. You can put anything you want and ask any questions that you maybe even think are stupid questions. Doesn't matter, no such thing as a stupid question. So I do see everybody's chats. So yes, it does take too long because we don't have a calculator. So we can't really do this, right? Very often I would hear people say, look, I'm comfortable with math. I don't really need a lot of help with math. I just need help with verbal. My only problem with math is timing. I know what I'm doing, I just need to do it faster. Now, here's the thing. Most of us are comfortable with some sort of a basic math. But the way we've done things in high school, maybe this way, isn't going to work on the test. And many people, when they approach the verbal reasoning section, they don't even know where to start, or they don't know the strategy. Sometimes they just think that it should all make common sense, because many of us haven't learned the proper logic behind verbal questions, but at least we learned some math theory. So the key to success on the GMAT isn't going to be to do what we've always done, but do it faster. The key is going to be to do something different, just like in business, right? I mean, imagine somebody who, let's say, decided to create Uber. It wasn't like they were trying to pick up some phone calls for taxi, and they were just trying to fit in more phone calls in 1 minute. They just said, I need a different approach. I need an app. So we need a different approach to the GMAT questions if we want to be successful on these questions. So we call these different approaches, to start with, the strategy way. That's where a lot of people start really breaking the code of the GMAT. In addition to just the theory, I need to know some strategies, some shortcuts maybe. So what's one of the shortcuts I could use here? Well, I actually don't have to do all of the calculations. I can take advantage of certain patterns on the test. And one of these patterns is what's happening with the units digits as we do different operations. This strategy works for any multiplication and addition. It also works with some caveats with the subtraction. And unfortunately, it does not work for division. But here's how this strategy works. If I were to take two numbers, and these are just two random numbers unrelated to this question, and if I want to multiply them, without the calculator, I would need to go through this long multiplication process. And as the very first step of this process, I'm going to go ahead and multiply the last digit, also known as the units digits. 6 by 7. 6 by 7, of course, is 42. What happens next? Well, then I would take the 4, carry it over to the next digit, that's called the tens digit, and then I'll keep going. So a few minutes later, I'll actually find the answer. But what I know after 5 seconds is that the units digit, the very last digit in this number, is going to be 2. Because whatever I'm going to do, I'm just going to keep carrying things over to the next digit, but nothing is going to change that units digit. Because the GMAT is a multiple choice exam, that often is enough to find the correct answer. Look at the answer choices. They all, for the most part, have different units digits. So hopefully, I'm not going to get a 5 if I were to try to find the units digit. And in this case, I'm done. If I get a 5, we'll talk about this. What can I do if I do get a 5? But let's see if I can figure out not the answer, but just the last digit of the answer. Let's see if that's going to be a little easier. Let's start with 14. I have 14 multiplied onto itself 4 times. So 14 times 14 times 14 times 14. Well, let's see what happens if I were to do it maybe once or twice. Well, if I do it once, obviously, I'm going to have 14. If I do it twice, I'm going to have 14 times 14. If I only care about the units digits, I just need to see what's 4 times 4. And that, of course, is 16. So I know that 14 times 14 is a number that's going to end in a 6. Whatever the other digits are, it's great to know, but for this purposes of this question, it's not that important. So this is just 14 squared. I need to get to 14 to the power of 4. A couple of ways to do this. I can either square 14 squared, or I can just multiply 14 squared a couple more times by 14. Let's actually see what happens if we were to continue multiplying this number by 14. So 14 cubed, which is 14 squared times another 14, is basically going to be the previous number, the number that ends in a 6, times 14, another number that ends in a 4. So I have a number that ends in a 6 times a number that ends in a 4. That gives me 24. I only care about the last digit, which is 4. So 14 cubed ends in a 4. How about 14 to the power of 4? Well, that's going to be that number times another 4, and that's 16. So I know the units digit of 14 to the power of 4 is going to be 6. That number is going to end in a 6. Let me ask you, what about 15 to the power of 5? What digit would that number end in? What would be the units digit of that number? Yeah, everybody's saying 5. How do you know so quickly? Well, because 15 to the power of anything, I mean, any positive integer is going to be a 5. 5 times 5 is 25, 5 times 5 is 25, and we just keep going, keep going, keep going. We always get a 5. How about 16 to the 6? What do you think? What's going to be the units digit of 16 to the 6? Yeah, a few people are saying 6, of course. 6 times 6 is 36, times 6 36, so 16 to the power of anything is 6. Some of these are so easy. Any number that ends in a 5, doesn't matter what power it's going to be, it's always going to be a 5 in the end. Anything that ends in a 1, doesn't matter how many times, it's always a 1, or 0, it's always a 0, right? So you see there's these wonderful patterns that can help us save so much time on the test. So now what did we learn? We were adding 3 numbers. The first one ends in a 6, the second one ends in a 5, the third one ends in a 6. And if we add these numbers up, we're going to get 17. We only care about the last digit. So we know that our answer needs to end in a 7. And I really love how somebody in the comments just a few minutes ago said, I guessed the answer and then describe what this person was actually doing. So you can actually call this a guessing strategy. We're not finding the actual answer, we are guessing. Or let me just qualify what I said. We're not calculating the exact number. We're choosing among the answer choices given. And here's a great thing about the GMAT. It is a multiple choice exam. Unlike some other exams where you might have to calculate the answer and actually write it out, including, for example, GRE, where there's a question type called numerical entry, where you actually have to do the calculation and then type the answer in a special box. The GMAT's a multiple choice exam, so the correct answer is always in front of you. All we need to do is just choose what it is. We've determined that the answer must end in a 7, so there's only one answer choice that ends in a 7. And we're done. And we can do this in 2 minutes. So you might be wondering, well, what would happen if I got a 5? Does that mean it's not a good strategy? Well, see, sometimes you'll be able to eliminate all answer choices and just have one left. But sometimes you can eliminate most of them and maybe have 2 left, or maybe 3. In that case, all we need to do is try to see how we could possibly break the tie. Maybe there's something else that's going to help us figure that out. Let me show you what we could have done here. Let's say we ended up with the units digit of 5. Well, answer choice B ends in a 5. It's about 4 million. Answer choice E ends in a 5. It's about 200 million. Well, I'm sure I can figure out what the answer is approximately if I know it's either 4 million or 200 million, right? I mean, I can just estimate what approximately the answer is going to be. And even if I'm a little bit off, let's say instead of 4 million, I get 10, I still know it's going to be B, right? And if I get like 150 million or 300 million, and the units digit is 5, I know it's going to be E, because it's just way too big for 4 million. So sometimes we need to be adaptable. And that's why on the GMAT, it's not really about knowing math, right? It's really about learning how to think differently. There's certain logic, there's certain patterns behind the test. After all, it's a standardized test where everybody who goes for the test does different questions. And if you go for the test multiple times, you're going to do different questions every single time. So it's standardized because it requires you to think a certain way. It's the process of approaching the question that's more important. And you need to be flexible. If you tried something and it didn't work, maybe try something else, or maybe narrow down the list of answer choices and keep going. It's just like solving a business problem, right? Sometimes, let's say you want to launch a new product. So you're going to try some new products, see which one you can manufacture profitably. Then you can try which one's going to sell, and so on and so forth. So that's why I'm making these connections with the world of real business, because the GMAT is the test that not only helps evaluate how well you can be ready for the business school, but it also helps prepare you for the business school. It teaches you certain kinds of skills. So let me show you another way of doing this question. Let's call this the mastery way of doing this question. And that is when you want to try to use even more logic behind the questions. So one of the things that we can do is we could try to see if we can quickly narrow down the list of answer choices. Maybe we can eliminate some answer choices that would obviously fall outside of that maybe range. So one of the things we could do is we could look at the answer choices. That's a very good habit, by the way, is to look at the answer choices. Very, very important to do that, because the answer choices very often tell us quite a lot. And one of the things we can notice here in the answer choices is that they are quite far apart. AC, by the way, stands for answer choices. So they are quite far apart. I have 700,000, 4 million, and all the way to 200 million. What that means is I actually can just estimate the answer, just like what we mentioned before. Even if I'm off a little bit, I'll still be able to find the answer. So let me ask you, if I were to just estimate the answer, so what would it be approximately? I just want the ballpark. Which of these three numbers would I actually start with? The 14, the 15, or the 16? Where would I start? If I just want to ballpark this answer. I mean, are these numbers pretty close to each other, or is one of them a lot bigger than the other? Yes, exactly. So many of you mentioned 16. Of course, because 16 to the power of 6 is a lot bigger than 15 to the 5. It doesn't look like that, but it actually is. Because this is exponential growth, right? For many of us, it's hard to understand what is exponential growth, but it's a very fast growth. So 15 to the 5 is less than a million. 16 to the 6 is a lot more than that. So how can I estimate 16 to the 6? Well, it's actually not that hard. There are a couple of things we can do this. First of all, we could use our concept of the exponents. And 16 is actually 2 to the power of 4. So that's why 16 to the 6 is going to be 2 to the power of 24. And then if we know some rules of shortcut math, we probably also know that 2 to the 10 is 1,000, which means 2 to the 20 is approximately a million. And 2 to the 24 is going to be 2 to the 20, which is a million, times 2 to the 4, which is 16. So the answer is 16 million. And honestly, if you're comfortable with mental math, and if you come to our class, we're going to give you lots of exercises and some materials to also help you be more comfortable with mental math, then this is going to take 20 seconds of your time. Now, some people are going to look at this and say, you know what? Why did the GMAT give me two answer choices that are very close? This kind of falls outside the pattern. They gave me all of the answer choices that are very far apart, and yet these two are very, very close. Maybe they're trying to trick me into doing these long calculations. Maybe they're hoping I'm going to maybe estimate, and then I know it's about 16 million, and then I'll be stuck. And maybe panic and maybe choose the wrong answer, right? I mean, the GMAT's a very psychological exam. People who make the test, they know how people think. They know the sorts of patterns that people display. So that's why they're going to do this. Regardless of how I chose this, whether just because I believe that I know how the GMAT tries to trick people or because I've actually estimated it, I'm now down to C and D. So the question is, how can I break the tie between C and D? What do you think? If I know now for sure it's C or D, I haven't done the units digit strategy. I chose a different strategy. So now I'm just looking at C and D and trying to decide which one's right. What do you think we should do now? I mean, we can randomly guess, right? And we're going to have a 50-50 chance. That's a better chance than the other. We could try to calculate 15 to the 5. That's probably going to take some time. We want an easy way out. And one of the ways to find this easy way out is to really see what would help us make the decision. You look at answer choices C and D, and you could maybe notice, again, this comes with practice, and we certainly go through a lot of these patterns in our full program that takes 6 weeks. But you also train yourself to look at these patterns. Answer choice C is even. Answer choice D is odd. That alone is enough for me to break the tie. Because if I look at my original question, 14 is an even number. Even to any power is always even. Odd to any power is always odd. So now I have even plus odd plus even. I have two even numbers plus one odd. That is guaranteed to get me an odd number. So that's why the answer is D. And I can do this even quicker if I can use these, again, more conceptual ways to understand the numbers. There are always different ways. Sometimes you can just see how the numbers work. Sometimes you can just try some numbers and actually experience how they work. Sometimes you can use a bit of algebra. So there are many different approaches. The question then becomes, what would my score depend on? What approach would I need to take if I want to get a high score, as opposed to somebody who's going to take a low score? And the answer is also in the official guide or on MBA.com. The same people who make the test, they also talk about what would it take to actually succeed on the test. And essentially, like I mentioned, we are very good relationship with the GMAT, and we go there, we visit them in their headquarters every year. And I remember they actually said, look, when you speak with your clients, please, please, please tell them that so many people misunderstand what the test is about. So many people think it's about math, or it's about knowing English, or maybe about knowing business, but it's not. This is a test of what the GMAT calls higher order reasoning skills. These are the skills that matter in the management classrooms and in the 21st century workplace. So it's a skills-based test. And that's why our old mantra, knowledge is power, is totally outdated, ladies and gentlemen. That's like 19th century. That's not even 20th century, right? Or maybe like the middle of the 20th century. I grew up before Google. I went to school in the 90s. So I was actually told by my teachers that knowledge is power. But now thinking that knowledge is power is kind of like think if I want to go in the Olympics and try to compete against Michael Phelps, all I need to do is gain a bunch of knowledge about how to swim, right? There's a wonderful book on Amazon called How to Swim. I read this book, I'm going to be a really good swimmer, right? Not really. I need to do things. But see, the thing is, if I do something and I don't know how, let's say I'm going to try to swim, but I don't know how, chances are it might be dangerous. Or, as long as I have the flotation device, maybe it's not going to be dangerous, but I might give up. So that's why I might need a bit of coaching. And that's why I'm actually so glad that you came here. You recognize that there are many things we can learn from other people. And very often when you, for example, come to a class, you're going to learn from other people in the class almost as much as you're going to learn from a professor. And it's certainly the case about the MBA, and it's even the case about the GMAT class. Many people like to come to our live classes because they can meet other people. But you can also learn a lot from other people. Sometimes these other people are going to make mistakes that you didn't think of making. But it's a mistake that you might potentially make on a real test. Right? So surrounding yourself with people who are going through the same. If you want to learn how to swim, just go to a swimming class, jump into a pool, and have somebody there to guide you. Let me properly introduce myself, and then we'll get to more questions. So my name is Sergey Cook. I'm a president and one of the instructors at a company called AdmitMaster. This is my official score report, just to show you everything's legit. I got a score in top 1%. This is the old score of 750. And I'm showing this not to impress you. It honestly impresses me, especially because I've been able to do this in 2 weeks. Well, literally, I learned what the test is about. 2 weeks later, I had a score of 750. So some people tell me, oh, Sergey, of course, yeah, you're a genius. And my answer is, honestly, I'm not. I mean, sorry to bust some GMAT myths here, right? I'm not a genius, and I know many GMAT instructors who are incredibly good at teaching the GMAT and obviously doing the GMAT. They're also not genius. They're still smart people. But the thing is, they've been doing this for so long, they know exactly what they're doing, right? So I had a problem with my car recently. I went to a mechanic, and I had this problem. I couldn't figure out what it is. I went to the mechanic. 30 seconds, he tells me exactly what the problem was. Why? Not because he's smarter, but he's done this for so long. So very often in life, instead of me trying to figure something out, I can just go and find somebody who really already know all of the ins and outs. So for me, I've done my GMAT over 20 years ago. I've been teaching the GMAT for close to 15 years. And how it all started, I actually just got really lucky in school. I had some amazing teachers that told me that not all power is knowledge. You also need to learn how to think. And this was my teacher. He was honestly the best teacher I've ever had in my life. I'm still grateful to him to this day. He passed away a few years ago at the age of 95. He was just incredible. And he was always challenging us in just the right way. He was also just teaching us how to think. And from our class in high school, we had 95% of people who went to university, which is way, way, way higher than the general population. And it's a lot for thanks to him. So as a result, maybe that's how I became a teacher, right? And my mom's a math teacher, my wife's a teacher of kindergarten, so I guess maybe that's how I got into doing this work as well. I do have an MBA as well, but now this is my idea of retirement. When I finished my MBA, I went to work for a very big corporation, worked in the corporate finance department, worked there for about 10 years, and then just said, I love working with people so much more than I love working with numbers. So can I think of a career where I can actually work with people and help people? And that's my dream job. That's my idea of a retirement. When I almost every day I would speak with our students who just say, wow, I get this amazing score, I got into this amazing school. Or just this morning I was talking with our client who just says, wow, I'm seeing already so much progress after only 2 weeks studying, that he said that I couldn't even imagine how I could do this without these strategies. And one thing that's really interesting to know is that you don't need to have a background in math. For me, I wasn't good in math in my elementary school, but then when I got this teacher, he really taught me how to think differently. And for the purpose of the GMAT, you can actually do it a lot quicker than how many years it took me, because when I prepared for the GMAT, technically I didn't know what was the GMAT. I just learned a lot of different logical techniques and strategies. Then I competed in different math Olympiads and so on. And I remember I had a student a few years ago. She was kind of stuck in the work that she didn't like. She was a tester at a telecommunications company, and she hated math, hated her job. And we met. She came to our class. And long story short, a few months later, she successfully got into a school in California. It wasn't the top-ranked school. It wasn't Stanford, but it was still a reasonably good school. So now, 10 years later, she's traveling the world. She's working for Google. She's doing lots of volunteer work. And she just recently, we spoke. We keep in touch with a lot of our clients. And she recently told me that she actually now trains kids for math Olympiads. Like, how can you do this? You hated math. And she said, yeah, but I had some really good teachers. So sometimes people tell me, well, I have, I've never had good teachers. That's okay. It's never too late to have good teachers. So here's what's important here to remember, ladies and gentlemen. Anybody can do this. Anybody can get a very good score. And I'll tell you exactly what you need for that. One of the things you need is to have an open mind. It's not about trying to do what we learned in high school. It's about thinking outside the box. The strategies we can teach you are the strategies where sometimes you look at this and say, wow, that really works. But it does. So here you would notice that I highlighted some words for you from our Google review by Daria. She said, I learned how to think outside the box. I learned how to manage my time and stress. I learned how to think like a CEO. So she didn't say, I learned a bunch of complicated formulas. She said, I really learned how to think differently. And in 3 months, she was able to raise her score from a pretty bad score of 380 to 700. And she's actually graduated already 2 years ago from the Master of Financial Analytics program at the London Business School, one of the most competitive Master of Finance programs. Obviously, London Business School is one of the most competitive business schools. And now she works in Amsterdam as an analyst. So she completely changed her life because she just said, look, I got to learn something different, some different approaches. I really got to train myself how to think differently. That includes managing time and stress, and that includes also this higher level of thinking. I'm actually going to show you a few questions where we see exactly what I mean when I say think like a CEO. That's what that's what we teach in our classes. Is recently one of our students, she was in a class about 9 years ago. She became a CEO of Staples Canada. one of our students who was in a class, in our GMAT class, then she did her MBA program, and now she's the CEO of multi-million or multi-billion-dollar company. Right? So you could start preparing how to think like a CEO even through preparing for the GMAT. Now, the GMAT exam keeps adapting. Now we are in the 11th version of the GMAT. And this is called GMAT Focus, GMAT Focus Edition. This is a new name for the GMAT Focus, or for the GMAT, that is used as a transition, just so that we can differentiate between the new version and the older version that's known as the 10th edition of the GMAT. The name GMAT Focus is actually going to go away. Once everybody's used to the new format, it's just going to become the GMAT, and that's going to happen on July 1st. So now that 11th version of the GMAT is a shorter GMAT. It's 2 hours, 15 minutes. It consists of 3 sections: quantitative reasoning, verbal reasoning, and data insights. It's all now pretty standardized, 45 minutes per section. You can take the exam in any order. You'll be given 1 10-minute break. You have slightly different number of questions in different sections, 20, 21, and 23. Certain things have been removed from the old test to make the test shorter. So the writing part has been removed. The sentence correction, grammar has been removed, as well as geometry. All the regular geometry has been removed. It doesn't mean that you're not going to see any pictures. You still will, especially in the data insights. But the actual triangles and circles and things like that, that has been removed. Here are a couple of other very important things to remember. Is that overall, the GMAT is adapting to what's happening around us. And the GMAT also is adapted to try to get people to demonstrate more of a logic skills. Many people used to prepare for the GMAT by just being very good in math. That is really no longer going to work, because quantitative reasoning and especially data sufficiency questions are now less about math. They're more about logic. Many of these questions are now what's called word problems. And I'll show you an example of a few of these problems. All 3 sections are now adaptive, which means they change. The difficulty of the questions change as you go through the section, and all sections are now part of the total score. So 1/3 of your score is quantitative, 1/3 of the score is verbal, and 1/3 of the score is data insights. There are many different types of questions on the GMAT, but in our refresher classes today, we will talk about problem solving and data sufficiency, essentially questions that involve math. And in our verbal refresher class, we are going to talk about critical reasoning as well as reading comprehension, which are part of the verbal reasoning section. So somebody was asking, do universities have a preference between the traditional GMAT and the GMAT Focus? At this moment, everybody who took the test in the past 5 years, for the most part, took traditional GMAT. All new people will only have an option to take GMAT Focus. So universities do not have a preference, right? Because most people didn't have a choice of what exam to take. There is a conversion table. I'll actually show it to you in just a moment. So today we're talking about this. On May 1st, which is our next verbal refresher class, we will be talking about critical reasoning and reading comprehension. If you haven't registered yet for that class, please do. We'll send you a reminder tomorrow with the link. So please just click on that link, and all your information should be pre-filled. Should be very easy to register. Now, we mentioned that the GMAT is a computer adaptive test. So what that means is the test adapts as you go through each of the sections. So you start the quantitative section, you start from medium difficulty question. As you answering the questions, the difficulty of the questions will either go up or go down. You want it to go up, because if it goes down, that means your score is going down with it. If it goes up, that means your score is going up with it. So your score is basically determined in very simple terms by the difficulty of the questions you do towards the end. Right? That's an oversimplification. It's actually not as simple, but the formula for a calculation, the algorithm is pretty complex. We don't really need to understand it as well. What we do need to understand is that the difficulty of the questions will change. So as we answer the questions incorrectly, the questions will keep getting easier. As we answer the questions correctly, the questions will keep getting harder. And then the more hard questions we answer correctly, the higher is going to be the score. The score scale right now is different from the GMAT. On the GMAT exam, only the quantitative and the verbal sections contributed towards the total score. The scores were different, the score scales. Now, the score scale for each of the three sections is 60 to 90. So 60 is the lowest score, 90 is the highest score. And the total range for the total scores is 205 to 805. So the GMAT Focus Edition has a 5 at the end. The GMAT, regular, traditional GMAT, does not have a 5 at the end. It's just a 0. There is no simple scale. There is a conversion table. So the business schools will look at the conversion table and they will say, okay, so somebody who has a 700 on the traditional test, that's equivalent to somebody who has 645 on the new test. Even though these tests measure slightly different skills, you know, the GMAT focuses a lot more about logic. That's still how they convert. They have no other way. And the GMAT gave them this conversion table. You can also find this conversion table on MBA.com. The score of 705 on the new exam is just like the old score of 760, which only 1% of people get. Somebody was asking, what about the executive assessment? Is it scored the same way? And the quick answer is yes and no. The executive assessment is still based on the old version of the GMAT, but it uses the scoring algorithm that's resembling the new version, except that it's not adaptive. Yeah, I know. So there are actually 3 sections, and all 3 contribute towards the total score, but they're actually not adaptive. The way they're selected is a little bit different. You also don't really have an option to choose the order, at least not as flexible. And the score scale on the executive assessment is from 100 to 200. Now, executive assessment obviously is an exam that's used for executive MBA programs, usually for somebody who has at least 10, 15 years of experience. Okay, perfect. Yes, so please, yeah, if you have any questions at any point in time, put them in the chat box, the Q&A box. But I have a question for you, ladies and gentlemen. I think it's time that I start asking you again some questions. And the first question I wanted to ask you is, why do you think the math on the GMAT is hard? Well, that's a good question. I mean, there could be so many reasons why the math could be hard. And I'll show you some of the reasons why math is hard. And I'll also show you some of the reasons why math is not hard. Okay, I'm just looking at the answers here. Questions are confusing. Yeah, that's a fairly common answer. Time pressure, very limited time per question, for sure. It's been a while since I've done this sort of math. Yeah, I mean, elementary school, ladies and gentlemen, right? I mean, for most of us, it's at least 10 years away. Questions are confusing. No calculators. Yeah, I mean, how do we do math now? I remember I had, when I just started teaching the GMAT many, many years ago, I remember one of my students in the class, we needed to find what's 5 plus 8, and she pulled out the calculator. I'm like, really, why are you doing this? I mean, 5 plus 8. And she's like, Sergey, you don't understand. I work for a bank as a financial advisor. I'm like, wow, you work for a bank as a financial advisor? You don't know 5 plus 8? Should, absolutely. When I work with people's money, I am not allowed to do mental math. If I need to calculate 5 plus 8, I'm going to pull out the calculator. That's my habit. And of course, she had to, break some of the old habits. Eventually did really well on the test. But initially, it was quite challenging to break these habits. And many of us have these habits that we sometimes need to overcome. And that's okay. So far, I see that most people are answering no calculator. It's been a while since I've done this sort of math. And these are all, of course, very good reasons why math could be challenging. There could also be some reasons that are maybe not as good, or why some people believe math is hard. But that is actually not the real reason. Let me show you what I mean. Let me show you a question that I found in one of the GMAT forums. where a person posted this, one of the GMAT instructors posted this question and just said, kids, this is a difficult GMAT question, try to solve it. Okay? And the thing is, the moment I looked at this question, I knew it's not a GMAT question, because the GMAT doesn't test cubic equations that cannot be easily simplified. But the thing is that many resources that you find online are the resources not necessarily for the GMAT. Many of these resources were created for some other tests. For example, a lot of the questions that you might see on some of the GMAT forums were actually the questions that migrated from, for example, a test called CAT, which is a college admission test in India. It's a pretty challenging test, very competitive, and the math on this test is more challenging than the math on the GMAT. So what many people do is they just say, okay, let me take a bunch of CAT questions and let me just rewrite them maybe slightly, and let's make them a GMAT question. And that's how a lot of people learn. And then there's an explanation of how to solve it. Right? So if you're comfortable with math, you probably would know how to solve a cubic equation in under 2 minutes without the calculator. And of course, there's a factoring process. And we've all done that sometime in high school. But believe it or not, that goes beyond the scope of the GMAT. So take some things you see online with a grain of salt. A lot of the GMAT material that you'll find online are not real questions. And that's why sometimes people go for the real test and say, wow, the questions I've seen in the real test are not what I've seen before. In fact, let me tell you this. Might be some shocking truth. When you go and buy a GMAT book, there's only one book that contains real questions, and that is the official GMAT guide. I mean, there could be several books, like the quantitative book and the verbal book and Data Insights book and the main book. But those are the only questions, or the only books that contain real questions. Any other book that you can buy in a bookstore, a Kaplan, Princeton Review, GMAT for Dummies, or anything else, is not using real questions. This is just how the industry works. The GMAT does not allow anybody to republish the questions in the book that's sold in a bookstore. The GMAT has a monopoly on that. So for that reason, many of the big GMAT companies, they make their own books. And when you come to their class, they will teach you based on these questions that are not real questions, right? So we're very fortunate that we don't publish our own book. We do have a workbook for the class. We do provide official guide to all of our students. So when you come to our class, we use real questions. So what you see in a class is very close to what you're going to see on a real test. We teach based on real questions. And even the homework we give you is real questions, because there's nothing as good as real questions. Very, very important. The GMAT spends a lot of time and money developing these questions. So you definitely want to use these questions when you're studying. Okay, so let's go back to this question, right? We already determined it's not a real question. Somebody just wrote this question, but I didn't want to give up. So I said, let me try anyway. Is there a way to do this question, even though I genuinely don't remember how to factor a cubic equation? And of course, there is a strategy. So let me show you the strategy, ladies and gentlemen. Here's what we can do here. We call this the back solving strategy here at AdmitMaster. Essentially, what you're going to do is you will take the answer choices and substitute them back into the question and see which one works. Only one of them should work. There's a certain process of how to do this efficiently, but even if we didn't know the process, we can just try them one by one and see what works. We have 2 minutes per question, so it's not going to take that long. So what I can do is I can actually take number 4, plug it to be instead of x. So it's going to be 4 cubed minus 8, 4 squared plus 4 times 4 plus 48. And that actually is 0. So what does that mean? So I guess that means that A is the correct answer, right? And many people who maybe learned some of these strategies but haven't practiced enough, haven't got enough of the coaching on what works and what doesn't work, well, then just choose A and move on. But here's the thing. The question didn't ask us what was X. The question asked us what was 4X. So before I plug in X from the answer choices, I first need to divide by 4. So if I want to test if A is the correct answer, I will take 4 divided by 4. I'm going to have 1, and then I'm going to put 1 instead of X. Wow, that's interesting. So I guess why would the GMAT give us 4 as one of the answer choices? So think about this. Think how people usually think. And the GMAT did a lot of research into how people think. Many people are going to look at this question and say, okay, I either will factor a cubic equation, or maybe I'll use some sort of another process. And I'm going to find X. The thing is, it's going to take me a while, but I'll find it. And then because there's so much time pressure on the test, what would happen is after some time, we're just so desperate to continue going to the next question because the time's running out, that at the moment we see the number that's one of the answer choices, we're going to choose that one and move on. So we can use that knowledge to our advantage, because we know that most people are going to find X and then forget to multiply by 4. Or they're going to test the answer choice and forget to divide by 4. So what we can do is we can actually take advantage of our understanding of how people make stupid mistakes. And ladies and gentlemen, one of the best ways to understand how to make stupid mistakes or how not to make stupid mistakes is to make these mistakes. Or sometimes be around people who are making these mistakes. That's why sometimes it's good to be in a group of people who are studying for the test, because you'll see what mistakes they're making. So if a lot of people make these mistakes, and the GMAT knows that too, then the way the answer choices are going to be structured is there should be an answer choice that is a trap answer. There'll actually be X, even though I'm looking for 4X. So in this case, what I would have here, ladies and gentlemen, is essentially a pair of answers where one's correct and one's a stupid mistake. In this case, it will be 2 answer choices that differ by a factor of 4. What 2 answer choices differ by a factor of 4? Well, the only such pair is 4 and 16. 6 times 4 is 24. There's no 24 there. 16 times 4 is 64. There's no one like this as well. So just simply knowing what's going on, just simply noticing some patterns, I can already get down to the correct answer a lot quicker. So when I actually saw this question for the first time, I looked at this and said, 4X. The answer is 16. That's it. That will take some practice, but that's what's going to help you get to a very high score. And you can learn this. This is a standardized test. It's a pretty predictable test. So this was a question that was presented as a difficult GMAT question, but now we know we still can deal with it. We still can work with it very efficiently, but it wasn't the real question. Let me show you another question that actually is a real question. This is a question from the official GMAT guide. So you may find this question in the book. In case you do have the official guide, please don't look for it. The idea is to try it out here. I will give you 2 minutes to look at this question, look at the table given, look at the answer choices, and see if you can figure out what is the correct answer using only pen, paper, what you see on the screen, and your wonderful brain. I'll give you 2 minutes. Wow. It's been 3 minutes and almost nobody answered this question yet. So what happened? I mean, first of all, let me stop the poll and show you what we voted for. As you could see, the most popular answer is D, followed by E. Nobody for A, B, and C. And many people didn't answer. So I would say about a third of the people present here today in this class have voted. Everybody else didn't. So I guess it's probably a difficult question, right? I mean, let me ask you this. Did anybody at some point, while you were doing this question, built an equation that looked like this? That's how the book will suggest that you do this. Obviously, you are given a certain percentage of blue marbles in each of the bags. And if you add up all of these blue marbles, you're going to get the total. And that total is supposed to be a third of the total number of marbles. So we have one equation, one unknown. We could technically find x. But it's going to be quite hard. I call it the work hard way. By the way, how hard do you think is this question? What do you think? Please let me know in the chat box. Is this a hard question? What do you think? Easy, medium, or hard? What do you think? Hard? Yes? Okay, many people saying a hard. Some people saying medium. Most people saying hard. Okay, well, look. How do we know whether the question is hard? Many people worry too much about seeing a hard question, and they sometimes worry even more about seeing an easy question. They see an easy question, they're like, oh, I must not be doing well. And then they see a hard question and say, oh, that's a hard question, right? We often talk negatively to ourselves. And a part of this, I was doing a tutoring session with one of our students yesterday, and another tutoring session with one of our students today. And that's sometimes what we need to work on, is really the way we talk to ourselves. So the only way to really know whether the question is hard is to see how many people get it right. That's how the GMAT knows what questions are hard and what questions are easy. Obviously, the GMAT doesn't tell us exactly how many people get this question right, but they do tell us whether the question is easy, medium, or hard. If you want to know a little bit more about how hard is this question, sometimes we can actually Google that question and see how some of these GMAT forums will actually classify it. Because the GMAT forums have this poll that's a lot more questions, right? Or a lot more people. There's like thousands of people answering this, so, and they collect statistics. And if very few people get that question right, then they'll classify this question as very hard. And this question, by the way, is one of the very few questions that is classified as very hard. So essentially, now if we use an analogy, the analogy is, think of this as riding skis or snowboard. This question is a double diamond. It's for experts only. Don't try it yourself, basically. That's what that means, right? But wouldn't it be nice to actually get the question done if we knew that there was a shortcut to that double diamond? So let's see if we can do that. Instead of trying to work hard, why don't we try to maybe work smart? And instead of trying to build this complicated equation, why don't we try to take some small steps towards doing this question? So let's take some small steps. One of the small steps that I can take is I could try to count the number of blue marbles in each of the bags. I mean, in 2 bags, I know exactly how many marbles there are, and I know the percent. So I can actually figure out the actual answer. And the math here is not that hard. 10.8% of 37, that's a little more than 10%. So 10% of 37 is 3.7. So that number has got to be 4. 66.7% of x, well, 66.7 is 2/3. So 2/3 of x. 50% is obviously half. So half of 32, that's 16. Okay, so guess what? Once we've taken this step, we could stop and think, is there anything we already know? We don't want to do more work than necessary. So let me ask you, what do we now know about the number of marbles in back Q? Can somebody please tell me, please let me know in the chat box, what do you think we know about the number of marbles in back Q? Essentially, what do we know about X? What do you think? Yeah, majority blue. Okay, so majority blue marbles, yes. 2/3 of them are blue. Anything else that we know about X? Just based on what we've done. Can be a multiplier. Okay, somebody's saying can be a multiplier of 4. Okay, a third is equal to 20. Maybe. Well, it doesn't have to be equal to 20, right? Because first of all, it cannot be equal to 20 because there's no answer choice 60. But here's, see, again, noticing the thing, and that's going to come with experience. Of course, I mean, you can learn this a lot faster, or you could just, you know, with enough experience, you'll probably start noticing these things, or you can get somebody to show this to you. But here's what you can notice. 2/3 of these marbles are blue. That means that that number must be divisible by 3. I need to be able to find 2/3 of that number, and the only way for me to do that is for the number to be divisible by 3. Divide by 3, and then I take 2 parts of that. So guess what? Some of the answer choices are not divisible by 3. So I know they cannot be the correct answers. I cannot take 2/3 of 5. So 5 is not the right answer. I can take 2/3 of 9 because 9 is divisible by 3. I can take 2/3 of 12 because 12 is divisible by 3. Can I take 2/3 of 23? No, I can't. So 23 can't be the right answer. How about 2/3 of 46? 46 is also not divisible by 3. So 46 is also not the correct answer. So guess what? I guess it is a difficult question because nobody got this question right here in this class. And we have quite a few people here. So it is a difficult question. They were actually right. Because the answer is gotta be B or C. That's the only option. Nothing else would work. Well, so now that we're down to 2 answer choices, the only 2 answer choices of which we can take 2/3 of the blue marbles, let me ask you, maybe what we can do is what we've done with that previous question is basically just plug in the X from the answer choices and see if it's going to work. And how many of these remaining 2 answer choices should we really plug in and test? What do you think? Should we try both of them? We try one of them? You know what? Let's just start somewhere. Let's just start with 12. Maybe 12 is our favorite number. So I'm going to just go ahead and pretend that X is 12. In that case, I have all the information I need in my table. Back Q is 12. 2/3 of 12 is 8. And now I can calculate the total. 37 plus 12 plus 32. So 37 plus 32, that's 69. 30 plus 30, that's 60. 7 plus 2, that's 9. 69 plus 12, that's 81. No, not a hard mental math. 4 plus 8 plus 16. 4 plus 16, that's 20 plus 8, that's 28. 28 is not a third of 81, right? I'm supposed to get a third blue marbles. If I divide 81 by 3, I'm not going to get 28. So 12 is not the right answer. And how do I know this so quickly? Is 81 some odd number? I could just look at the left column and there's 37, that's odd. 12, that's even. 32, that's even. Okay, so that's odd. On the right, 4 plus 8 plus 16. Yeah, that's even. An even number cannot be a third of the odd number, because if I multiply an even number by 3, I'm going to get an even number. So no, answer choice C is not the correct answer. So I guess it has to be B. Do I need to test B? Absolutely not. That's the only one that's left. Why would I bother? Some people then go and double check. Why? We already eliminated everything other than one answer choice. We found the right answer, and that's what we need to do in our quantitative reasoning questions, which is this an example. So let me ask you this question. Ladies and gentlemen, this question is classified as linear algebra question. Linear equations, algebra, fractions. How much of the algebra did we just do? Yeah, not very much, right? And if we've done this much algebra, what's the chance of making a mathematical mistake? Yeah, exactly, minimal to none. So the less math we do, the less chance of making a mistake. And that's the secret to success in the quantitative reasoning section, and overall in the GMAT and many other question types as well, is take shortcuts. Obviously, you need to know these shortcuts. Do less math, that saves you some time, and it reduces the chance of a mistake. And also ask yourself a question. Which approach would you enjoy more? Do you prefer to work hard, or do you prefer to work smart? What do you think a successful manager or successful CEO would do? Very often we talk about us working hard. We're hard workers and things like that. But guess what? I was just earlier this year reading an article that an average CEO of a Fortune 500 company made an annual salary of the average employee at that company on January 3rd, before lunch. That's working smart. That's also leveraging, right? Because the CEO obviously has a lot of people who work for them. Just like the former CEO of IBM said, I'd rather make 1% of 100 people than 100% of one person. That's why the MBA degree is one of the fastest ways to make six-figure salary, and very often more, because that's the power of leverage. People go to an MBA program to become managers. They have people working for them. And that's why they can make the annual salary by January 3rd if they make it to the CEO. And if all we do is work hard, we're going to make a really good hourly wage, but we still need to work until December 31st to actually make that annual salary. We've got to start teaching ourselves how to think differently. And unfortunately, we were not born with this, and our teachers in school often didn't do that. They didn't really teach us, because very often they didn't know themselves. But now is a really good time to actually start thinking like a CEO, right? Now, you'll say, Sergey, you keep talking about this thinking like a CEO. What's that? What do you really mean by that? Well, why don't I give you a question that will actually let you think like a CEO? Let you try that hat of a CEO right now. So here's a question. This is going to be a data sufficiency question that's part of data insights. You will actually have a question. The question will describe a certain scenario, and then there'll be a question at the end. And guess what? I'll give you some time to work on this question, so don't worry. Just please stay with me. I'll explain how this works. So you're given a question, but you're not able to answer that question. You don't have enough information to answer that question. That's how the questions are structured. You never have enough information to answer that question. You need more information. Always. Every single data sufficiency question, you need more information in order to be able to answer that question. And guess what? The GMAT is going to give you that information. They will give you two statements. And your job is to determine which of these two do you need to answer the question. So kind of think like this. You're a manager. You get a project that lands on your desk. You are not going to be the one doing this project. You need to determine what team members do you need. So the statements are your team members. Can only one team member do this? Or maybe only the other one? Maybe either one of them? Maybe you need them both? Or maybe even if you take both of your team members, both of the statements, and you try to do that project, they're still not able to do that. So that's really what the question's asking about. Basically asking, in order to be able to answer that question and basically complete that project, do you need statement 1 or statement 2, or maybe both? So the answer choices give you the combination of different statements that might potentially be helpful to answer that question. And I will give you 2 minutes to try to figure that out. Which of the 2 statements would be sufficient to answer this question? Do we need them both? Or maybe even if we get them both, we still don't have enough information. So there you go, for about 2 minutes. How's it going? Thinking like a CEO. It's been a little over 2 minutes. In fact, it's been almost 2.5 minutes. That's about a minute more than what you would normally have for these types of questions on the test. Normally, you want to try to do these types of questions sometime in the range of about 1.5 minutes to 1:45. So let me go ahead and end the poll right now, and let me actually share the results with you. As you could see, the majority of the people voted for C. So I guess C means that we need both of these pieces of information, right? So this is a question also from the official guide. And I don't know if you know that, but the official guide does have explanations to the questions. And many people would then look at the explanations if they didn't get the question right. And here's what the explanation is going to look like. I don't know about you, but I have a master's of mathematics, and sometimes my stress level is going way up when I read these explanations. In fact, I remember at one of our very first meetings with the GMAT many years ago, when I just started teaching the GMAT, we were invited to this mini conference. And they only invite people who they know do a very good job teaching the GMAT. So I was very fortunate. They invited me. And I remember I asked them this question. I said, why are the explanations so terrible in the official guide? Right. And, I was there for the first time. There were some people who've been there like a couple of times. And everybody's like looking at me. And I thought, wow, they're going to kill me now for this question. Right. And everybody's like, yeah, we want to know too, right? I'm like, wow, that's great. I guess I'm going to be popular here. So I asked them, why are they so bad? The answer was not what I expected. I was expecting them to say, oh, come on, like, we want to make things complicated or something along these lines. But what they actually said is, look, they said, there's a reason why we write the explanations that way. When we write the explanations, we cannot take any shortcuts, because when somebody picks up the book, they need to know 100% that this is the correct answer. Because this is what's called a high stakes exam. The outcome of this exam could determine the direction of your entire future career. I mean, people who do an MBA from top schools, they'll become CEOs, they'll make millions of dollars. And they're going to make way more money, be way more successful than somebody, for example, who is just with a bachelor degree. And the GMAT is a test to get there, right? So what they say is, look, because it's such an important test, we need to make sure we protect ourselves from anybody suing us and saying that's not a good test or it's not an accurate test. So every time we do a question, we would write this explanation, and we're not going to take any shortcuts. We just have to go step by step by step by step by step. I'm like, yeah, but people on a test should be taking shortcuts, right? And they say, yeah, absolutely. They must. Otherwise, they'll never get a good score. But that's not why we write these explanations, right? You understand? I'm like, yeah, I understand. Okay, so this was a bit of an eye-opener for me, and I share this with many of our students. Happy to share this with you as well. So please don't rely on the explanations in the official guide. They don't contain shortcuts. At least 95% of them don't. And they certainly don't teach you how to think like a CEO. So maybe instead, let's just pretend that we are a CEO. Now, one of the things that I love about teaching the GMAT is that I've done my own MBA 20 years ago. So when I talk to people in the class, I can relate to them. I can relate to how I've been 20 years ago. And I know exactly what they're getting themselves into. And I can relate things to their MBA experience as well. And many people saying, look, I feel like this was really like the pre-MBA class. I'm so much better prepared for the MBA program. So let's think like a CEO. Let me ask you a question. Does anybody like to buy things at a regular price? My wife went to do some shopping for clothes. She said, oh, I need new clothes. So she went to the mall today to get some new clothes. And like, I'm going to make sure that I buy everything on discount, right? I mean, let me know, please, in the chat box, who likes to buy things at a regular price? Yes, of course. Yeah, absolutely. Everybody's like, no way. I want the discount. Guess what? Discounting is a marketing strategy. Did you know that when you walk into a mall, there's almost always a discount? Sometimes it just feels like it's today, but it's almost always there. There are many different discounts, maybe sometimes. But the idea is to incentivize you to walk into the store. Because if there's no discounts, then it's probably a Louis Vuitton where they don't need a discount, right? Or a Gucci. But if you need a discount, don't come into our store. But for a regular clothing store, we want to create a discount because we want to create an incentive, but we don't want to lose the money. So this is a balancing act. How do we create this marketing strategy? And that's exactly what this question is actually about. So if you're a CEO of this clothing store, you're going to say, okay, I'm selling shirts. If I just put the shirt at the regular price, nobody's going to buy it unless people are desperate and they need a shirt. And nobody else is discounting the shirts, right? But I know other stores do that. So what I'm going to do, yeah, exactly. When somebody's saying, like, you're buying a bunch of stuff, like you go to Costco and you're buying 48 packs of toilet paper and you don't know where to store it, things like that. So they basically create that value. And they say, look, you're going to buy not one shirt. We're going to give you an incentive to buy two. The first one, you'll buy at the regular price. So we make our profit on the first one. The second one, however, you buy at the discounted price. So obviously, you're going to buy two. I mean, who would buy one, right? You buy two and you save some money. The BOGO price. Often you go and they tell you, oh, you buy 5 shoes, you get 1 for free. Something like that, right? So that's exactly what they do here. And what they're actually doing, the way they're structuring it, is they're saying the profit the store is going to make on the sale of 2 shirts is going to be exactly the same as the profit they're going to make if they only sold 1 shirt. So what does that mean? That means that the second shirt is sold at 0 profit. The entire profit was captured with the first shirt. The second shirt is sold at no cost. Sorry, at no profit. That means it's sold at cost. That means, ladies and gentlemen, is the discounted price of the second shirt is equal to the cost of the shirt to the store. Right? That's how we're going to price it. Whatever it costs us, we're going to sell it to you, the customer, the second shirt. We're going to make our profit on the first shirt. Let's go back to what the question was asking. It was asking us, somebody who buys 2 shirts, so obviously the first one regular price, the second one discounted, that should be equal to the cost of the store. What is that discounted price of the second shirt? That's what we need to find out. Let's see what statements are going to help us do that. Statement 1 says the regular price of each of the 2 shirts is $16. Okay, sure, that's fine. But the question wasn't asking me for the regular price. It was asking me for the discounted price. So by itself, this statement is certainly not sufficient. There's not enough information to answer the question. How about statement 2? Well, statement 2 tells me that the cost to the store is $12. Wait a second. That's exactly what we need. We need to know the discounted price. Statement 2 gives us the discounted price, which is equal to the cost because the profit is 0 on the second shirt. So the answer is B. Do we need to know the regular price? We don't. It's interesting to know the regular price, but we don't need it. Very often, people would choose answer choice C because they feel that they need more information than they really do. And that's why C is often called the trap answer. It sometimes is the correct answer, but not as often as many people choose it. Now, to do this question and to actually think that way, obviously will require some practice and building up some confidence. And that is also something very important to remember, is that the GMAT is trying to destroy your confidence. Sometimes it'll give you questions and you're still thinking of that question as you start doing the new question. And that is why, ladies and gentlemen, when many people study for the test, they give up. I'll show you some statistics. They give up just because it's a hard test. It's hard to keep your motivation. So sometimes you need a little bit of an extra boost to keep your motivation. So let me share with you a very quick story of somebody who was almost ready to give up. That person was studying for the test for a few years already and developed so much anxiety about the test that was basically saying, that's it, I'm done, no more. And I'll show you a very quick story by this person. It takes less than a minute. Let me see if I can get this going.
Hello everyone, my name is Darini. I was with Admin Master in 2020. I did the Virtual Mastery GMAT class. I came to meet Admin Master when I was trying to do my GMAT. It was terrible on me, to be honest. I thought I could do it on my own. In the end, I realized Admin Master made me save so much time because they were giving me, first of all, moral support. They were my best cheerleader, and to be honest, that has no price at all. They helped me jump from a score of 500-ish to 700. And thanks to them today, I'm at Oxford Side Business School, where I'm doing my first week of class now. And to be honest, Admin Master was a definite stepping stone in this. They were helping me so much with giving me strategies, helping me focus on my time management and so on. So definitely do not hesitate. These are your best allies when it comes to the GMAT. Take care, everyone, and good luck in your GMAT.
So such a great story. I would very often just talk to some of our clients that are saying, wow, you know, I've been trying this for a little bit and I find it hard to keep myself motivated. And the reality is that sometimes all this needs is just ask for help. Just maybe ask a little bit. That is definitely something that that is doable. Okay, let me stop. Okay, perfect. Yes. So Darini is now, she works, she lives in London, UK. She works for the United Nations, and just a great, great, great story. We've also, she was able to connect with some people from the class. She met a lot of new people as well. Somebody was asking, can you go back to the previous question about the discounted rate? Yes, I absolutely can. What would you like to know? What's your question? Let me know what is your question. Happy to answer that question. So maybe put this question in the Q&A box, and I'll certainly be happy to go back to this question as well. But I wanted to show you, ladies and gentlemen, why is B the answer? B is the answer because statement 2 on its own is sufficient. Statement 2 gives us the cost of the shirt to the clothing store. We know this shirt, the store is making 0 profit on the second shirt, and that is why the price, the discounted price of the second shirt is equal to the cost to the store. And that's exactly what the second statement gives us. So data sufficiency questions are actually quite tricky, but there's a process of doing data sufficiency questions. And I hope you're going to like them at some point, because there actually is a very enjoyable way to do data sufficiency questions. I remember Darini, she was just so terrified with data sufficiency. And she was honestly, she developed a lot of personal anxiety about this test. And thankfully, she didn't give up. Her parents couldn't believe, we actually met her in London. We've been in London last year and went for lunch with her. And she's like, Sergey, you wouldn't believe me. My parents didn't believe that I could do this, but you guys believed in it. Like, well, we believe in all of our clients because I know it's all possible. It just with the right support, with the right structure, you can do that. Is that okay? Do you understand why it's B? Let me know in the chat box. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, I want to wrap up in the next few minutes. I'm happy to answer your questions as well, but I wanted to show you a couple of very important things about studying for the test. One very important thing about studying for the test is that statistics that you see on MBA.com isn't the full picture. If you look at MBA.com, you will notice that 10% of people get scores of 700 or more on the old scale. But this statistics only accounts for people who actually go for the real test. If you're familiar with the concept of a funnel, basically like a sales funnel, here's how this funnel works. There are about 10 million people every year who think that doing a GMAT, doing an MBA might be a good idea. About 10 million people a year. I want to change their life, maybe want to change the world, maybe learn new skills and go to the graduate management program. Of these 10 million people, about 2 million people will start studying for the GMAT. They'll buy a book, they'll download the practice test, they'll do some questions, they'll join one of the free seminars, they watch some YouTube videos, subscribe to some channels. Of these people, only approximately 5% will actually take the real test. So what would happen to 95% of people? Well, they, for whichever reason, they give up. Sometimes they're not motivated enough. Sometimes they just, life gets in the way. It's hard to set aside the time. I'm not seeing progress. Sometimes people think, let me try studying for the test. And if I succeed, I'll go to the business school. If I don't, I guess that's not for me, right? Oh, that's not a good way to make a decision. That's not a good way to decide your future based on just some test. Anybody can do well in this test. Statistically, only approximately 16,000 people get the score that's a 700 plus on the old scale, 645 on the new scale. So if you can make it there, you're among 16,000 people worldwide. That's a pretty good group of people to be in. That would be enough for everybody to go in the top business school. So when you see something like you go online and sometimes all of these, sometimes there's advertisement. I know there's one company that does advertisement, like you do GMAT and they tell you that our average reported score is 730. 92% of people get score of 700 or higher. That is impossible. Now, there's a bit of a statistical manipulation here. Essentially, they just report the scores that they want to report. So take everything with a grain of salt. The statistics that I showed you is the statistics from the GMAT. Statistically, only 1 in approximately 600 people who think of doing an MBA will get a score of 700 plus. So it is a hard test. But with the right structure, the right strategy, and the right support, anybody can get that score. Anybody can get that 700 plus, which is on the GMAT focus is now 645 plus. How long does it take? That's a very good question. I'm going to answer that question. Somebody was asking, how long does it take? I will tell you. What's an average? I have seen people do this a lot quicker. I have seen people take a longer time. But I will share with you the average and kind of the range. But what I do know is there are different ways to study for the test. There's a way to study by learning theory. And that's why the average score on the GMAT is just 555. And that's among everybody who does the test. And remember, that's just 5% of people. We keep track of success of our students. We keep track of the scores of our students. We keep in touch with many of our students well past their MBA. Many of them are friends with each other. I'm friends with many of them. I always encourage people, when you come to a class, connect with other people and join our groups. We have amazing alumni groups here at AdmitMaster. We had, like I mentioned, one of our students from a few years ago became a CEO of Staples Canada. I looked through the LinkedIn, and all of our common connections are people from her class. So what a great way to expand your network, right? And I remember another one of our clients who was also CEO of a multi-million-dollar company, my good personal friend. It's a private company, so very wealthy individual. I remember he said, look, Sergey, you don't understand. When people come to the class, like a GMAT class, they're going to meet people from other schools. When you go to an MBA program, you're going to meet people from that program. But when you study for the GMAT, you're going to meet people from other programs. So in a way, that's even better than going to any specific school. Now, wow, that's really true. So that's why we really encourage everybody to connect with each other. And that also gives you a bit of motivation. And we know that about 35% of our students achieve scores in the top 10%, so approximately 1 in 3. And I like to say that we have the best clients in the world because 1 in 3 versus 1 in 600, I think that's amazing statistics, right? But we want to make sure when you come to us, you are enjoying the process and you're having a good time. Obviously, you're getting good results. So what is the process to actually get there, right? We talked about it's possible. You now know how to do that. I mean, one of the ways to do that is to connect with people who are capable of showing you these shortcuts. But what's the actual process? So the process is, ladies and gentlemen, it's very simple. One thing I love about the GMAT and one thing I love about our curriculum, and there's some really amazing people. One of our instructors been teaching the GMAT for 20 years and wrote multiple GMAT books. We work with a lot of smart people. I'm one of the least experienced with 15 years of experience, right? So we have people who've been teaching for like close to 30 years. You can imagine, right? Before some of you were born. So the process is very simple. That's what I love. You can break things down in simple steps. And when it comes to studying for the test, it's a 3-step process. And this process is not something we've invented. This is just something that we follow because that makes sense, because that's what people used to follow for many, many years. And I'm going to give you an example of learning how to drive a car. You could think of also the GMAT as learning a new sport or a new game. You learn football, you learn golf or skiing. Doesn't matter. Any new skill. A few years ago, I learned how to sail a boat. I followed exactly the same process. So here is the process of how you can master any skill you want. Step one, you have to know the rules of the game. That's the very first step. You got to know the rules, right? I mean, if you want to learn how to drive a car, you need to know that red means stop and green means go. That we drive here in North America on the right side of the road, in some parts of the world, the right on the left. You need to know that. Right? Same thing when I learned how to sail a boat. I needed to know some points of sail, and I needed to know things about the wind and about the geometry of the boat and things like that. When you are studying for the test, you need to know some rules. For example, you cannot divide by 0. If you take a square root of a negative number, you're not going to get a real answer. If you add two fractions, generally you can either find the common denominator or you can convert them into a decimal. These are some of the foundational rules. They're very, very important. So what I would suggest is that you brush up on these rules before you start studying for the GMAT intensively. Before you get too far into the GMAT strategies, you got to know the rules of the game. That's why we usually encourage our clients to sign up for the classes in advance. We have our next class that starts in 2 weeks. Another class starts in a month and a half. We have people already signed up for our class in September. Why we did this so much in advance? Well, some people like to plan in advance, but we definitely do encourage you to sign up for our class if you decide to join us sometime in advance, maybe at least a couple of weeks, because we will give you things to review and work on before you join the very first class. And the way we're going to do it, we'll make it fun. It's kind of like a computer game. You're going to be answering some questions. You'll be completing some challenges. It has to be fun. Otherwise, you wouldn't do that. Right, so that's step one. Step two, once you are familiar with the rules, and very often in many jurisdictions, many states and provinces, many countries, you will at that point be comfortable with the foundations. So now is the time to actually start doing it. And that's what's going to be the next step. So somebody's asking, the class starting in 2 weeks is for how long? So that second step is going to take 6 weeks. That is step two, which is essentially live training twice a week. You can do this virtually. You can do this in person if you're located in Toronto. The virtual is just as good as in person. In person, obviously, you're there with no distractions. Virtually is great because you don't have to travel anywhere. And it feels just as good. Now, we have people from different parts of the world. Right now, we have a person in our class from Africa. We have a person from Mexico, a person from Peru, and some people from the United States, some people from Canada, some people from Europe. And everybody is there to learn, and everybody's there to have a good time. So the virtual classes, now the technology works so well that it's all real time. And I will see you also on the screen. We have some big screen TVs in the class. You'll hear everything. You'll see everything. And you'll feel like you're in a real class. Many people comment after class. We ask them, what do you think about the class technology? We ask every single person about the technology, about anything we can do to improve. And many people say, I felt just like I'm in a real class. Right, so during these 6 weeks, we are going to, somebody was asking, can you drop a link to the 6-week class? Yeah, absolutely. I will actually do that. So what do we do during these 6 weeks? We are actually going to do things. We are going to show you how to do the GMAT. We'll show you the shortcuts. We'll show you the strategies. We'll actually walk you through many different steps of doing the GMAT questions. And most importantly, we'll get you to try. And you'll be able to share your experience. You'll be able to get some feedback, some suggestions. That's what we do. And why it's so important? Well, for two reasons. One, if you want to be efficient, it is best that you learn what really works up front. Right? When we learned how to drive a car, this was mandated by the ministry. We were told that somebody has to show us we can try ourselves because it's dangerous. Not because we're not capable, but because if we're trying to do something we've never done before, then usually we're not going to succeed. We're going to fail miserably the first time, right? And that's why many people give up on the GMAT, because they feel like they are a failure. And that's why when you come to our class, it's just such a friendly environment that we will support you, and we will certainly make sure that when you make mistakes, you learn from your mistakes, and we will certainly also get you to make a lot of mistakes, because that's the idea. That's how we learn. And we want to have the opportunity to give you feedback. That's why live class is usually a lot more efficient than self-studying. You could self-study using the resources that, for example, we provide, and it's a lot more affordable, and you can go at your own pace. But you're lacking that feedback, and that's unfortunately is what helps you study a lot more efficiently. There's also a blended option. I'll share this with you in a few moments. But this is a very important second step. Right? So regardless, if you decide to study on your own, or you decide to come to the class, you should be following these steps. You got to learn the strategies, and ideally either coach yourself, which means do the question, look through what you've done, and see if there's anything you could have done differently. See if you can find your own mistake. Many people just read the explanations and just say, "Oh, I should do that." But we already know that the explanations in the official guide don't contain shortcuts, but we do need the shortcuts. Right? So I want to be looking for these shortcuts when I'm doing the questions. So I want to learn these strategies, and I want to get feedback in case something yet doesn't work. But this is only 2 steps. There's also the third step, and that is practice. You may have heard practice makes perfect. I'm sure you have. I heard this a lot. But you know what? That's a lie. That's not true. Practice makes perfect sometimes, not always. I like this saying, practice makes a habit. The more you practice, the more that's going to become a habit. You practice something that works, you're going to develop a lot of good habits. Practice something that doesn't work, you're going to develop a lot of bad habits. If we go to a driving school that's terrible, we're going to develop a lot of bad habits, and then we're going to not be good drivers. But if we learn the good habits and we practice, and we're just going to reinforce these good habits. And that is very, very important. And that's why, in addition to learning in class, you will need to do a lot of practice. So we give you a lot of practice, many real questions. We even give you even more questions than are available in the official guide, because we want you to see the variety of questions. And most people are going to do maybe somewhere around 6 to 10 practice tests, and maybe a couple thousand questions by the time we're done. And all throughout this experience, you can always ask questions. You can come back even after the course is finished. So the way that we structure our program, if you'd like to join us and actually work through these 3 steps together, then our next program starts on April 30th. Then afterwards we'll have, so April 30th, actually that's a mistake. April 30th is an evening class, and May 25th is the weekend class. So the evening class is Tuesday, Thursday night, Eastern time. The weekend class is Saturday, Sunday morning, also Eastern time, 10 to 1:30. If you register by Wednesday, you can save $200 of any of our course. And you can take this course almost anywhere in the world, as long as, again, it's not in one of the countries where the technology doesn't work. And the way the class works, twice a week, 3.5 hours for 6 weeks, or once a week for 3.5 hours for 12 weeks. Fairly small class, about 10, 15 people. We give you all the materials, all the books, all the resources, all the mock exams. And then most importantly, this course is very flexible. You can come back and retake the class completely free for 1 year. You have office hours every week, so you can come and ask any questions you want. There are study groups. There are local study groups in different cities. There are virtual study groups that you can join. There are study groups with the instructor. That's all unlimited. You have access to all of this for up to a year. And you even have 3 personal tutoring sessions. Essentially, we guarantee you're going to get the score that you want, or maybe even higher, and we'll coach you until you're done. The cost of the course is approximately the same as other courses. It's a bit more affordable than some of these big brand names. but you're getting a lot more for that. There are also some flexible, yes, the 6-week program absolutely covers everything on the GMAT. I mean, we've been teaching, our organization has been teaching the GMAT for over 10 years. I personally been teaching the GMAT for over 15. So we do have a lot of the material, a lot of our strategies, our techniques, and absolutely we do cover everything in the GMAT, all 3 sections. We even teach things on the GMAT that most other companies don't teach yet. For example, there's such a thing as qualitative data sufficiency questions that require some knowledge of logic. So we teach that in our class. We have a class dedicated to that. Most other courses don't teach that yet because it's just so new. There's also an option to study completely by yourself. We call it the GMAT Express Self-Study Program. You can try it out for 7 days for free. Just go to admitmaster.com/offer. You're going to see an option to do that. There's also an option to watch the recordings of the classes without coming to a live class, but still have access to the instructor and all the support for a year. So somebody who is just physically not able to come to the class because of the scheduling, they will often choose that program. Still gives you everything. So we give you the recording of the recent classes, and there's an instructor there to work with you and help you throughout this whole process. Now, how long does it take? That's a very good question. Somebody was asking. So let me show you a couple of examples. This is probably the shortest that it could take with this program to get to an amazing score. So Brian came to us with a score that's about average, got to a score of top 1%, and it took just 6 weeks. Literally 4 days after the course was over, was able to get a score of 760 and got into a Wharton MBA. So one of the top MBA programs in the world. I believe in the Financial Times ranking, it may even be now #1 in the world. So 6 weeks, but this was studying full-time, 30 hours a week, coming to the class, doing the homework. I remember Brian said, look, I got 2 months. It was in just before the pandemic. So I got 2 months, I'm moving to a new state, I'm starting a new job with Google. I have only January and February. I need to get a very good score because my deadline for Wharton's coming up. And he was able to do that even 2 weeks ahead of schedule. So that's an option when you can study full-time. It can take potentially as little as 6 weeks. What if you actually work like crazy hours? Let me give you another example. Fionn also was during the pandemic. She was actually a nurse. You can only imagine how much work did she have to do. And she worked 4 different jobs. She worked for telehealth. She worked in a hospital. She worked in a retirement home. Just, crazy, crazy hardworking person. Imagine the stress also during the pandemic being a nurse in the emergency room. But she said, look, I'm not going to give up. I'm going to study 4 or 5 hours a week. She took the class. She set some time aside. She requested a little bit of time off. She was still working, but not as crazy hours for 6 weeks. And then after that, just continued. And then it took her about 7 or 8 months to get to a score of 760. But now there's so many options available. She was actually recommended by another of her friends who was also a nurse in the emergency room, ended up doing really well on the test, above 700, got into a good business school, found a job in consulting, worked for Deloitte for 2 years, then found a job in a private equity firm with the medical background being a nurse. I completely changed her life. So what is then the most important factor of success on the GMAT? And I'm going to share with you a quote by Zig Ziglar. It's a person who's self-made multimillionaire. He passed away already, but very, very successful businessman. And I love this quote because it's just so true. Most people who fail in their dream fail not because they can't do this, but they fail it because they're not committed enough. If you're committed enough, you can do this. Sometimes people ask me, will I succeed on the GMAT? And I say, look, I've been very fortunate. I've personally worked with thousands of people who've gone through our programs over the years. And the people I remember the most, there are many people who got scores of like amazing, crazy 770, 790. I remember them and I'm good friends with many of them. But I also remember people who came in and said, I don't believe I can do that. They took a practice test and they scored like 200, right? Or like 220. And they worked smart They put in the effort. They were very committed. And then they got to like 600 or 650 or 700 and completely changed their life. These are the people that you really remember. I take my hat off. So, ladies and gentlemen, take my hat off today for you because you are committing to this very important process. And the very first step is the GMAT. And I'm so glad that you committed to this process of studying for the test, because many of our clients tell us, you know what? I've learned so much. Sometimes they get a promotion even before they got the MBA. It happens quite often, right? So a bit of a forewarning. You come study with Admit Master, your manager is going to notice that you're doing something different, and you might get a promotion. So you might have to have a tough choice. Am I still going to go to an MBA program or not? Now, it doesn't happen to everyone, but it does actually happen fairly regularly. So if you'd like to join us, our next class is April 30th. If you'd like to come to our next free seminar on May 1st, we're going to talk about the verbal section. And go ahead and take a practice test at prygmat.com. You can find all of that information at admitmaster.com/offer. And if you'd like to talk, I love people. Honestly, I do this work. I'm pretty good at what I do. So I make a good living from this, but I'll be very honest with you. I do this because I love helping people. And I would love to help you. I'd love to even talk. If you'd like to simply connect and send me your resume and talk about your personal goals, I'd love to do that. We offer free 20-minute consultations, and I can take a look at your profile, give you some suggestions. Obviously, I can't make a decision for you, but at least I can ask you the right questions. And that often is very, very important. So if you'd like to connect, let me know in a poll. Please look for an email tomorrow with the recordings of this class. Please share it with your friends. You can just send it off to your friends. The recording is going to be available for the next week. Then it's going to disappear from the Zoom cloud. So if you need any recording after that, or if you need any of your friends to join this class and learn here as well, then please simply send them a link to our website. You go to admitmaster.com/offer. You can find everything you need there. Tomorrow, I will follow up with you by email. I'll send you a few notes. I'll send you a formula sheet that you could print and use. I'll send you a link to a practice test. I'll send you some additional resources. And most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, please remember, the MBA is all about leadership. If you're thinking of leveraging your career and making a lot of money, making the difference in the world, you will need to become a leader. And it all starts by becoming a leader of yourself. And very often, you just need to look a little bit inside and just say, what's really important for me? And if doing this is really important for you, then I'd love to talk. And I'd love to see how we can help you. Sometimes with just a bit of an advice, sometimes with some intensive training, whatever that is going to be, my sincere hope is that's going to help you to get to your goals. And with that, I want to thank you again for joining us here tonight. Have an awesome rest of the week. I hope that we're going to talk soon. Bye-bye.